It feels like magic because you can eat as much as you want, and all of these chronic medical conditions that you previously associated with, oh, I'm just eating too much food. Turns out, no, that's not the case at all. You were just eating too much of the wrong foods.
Today we are joined by none other than Dr. Ken Berry himself.
Everybody loves Dr. Berry, right?
Proper human diet has changed my life forever, and I owe that in large part due to Dr. Ken Berry. I never would have started if it wasn't for him.
We discussed virtually everything you need to know about starting a carnivore diet, including the most common mistakes that people make that ruin their results.
If I continued carnivore, but I added in the amount of dairy that I would like to consume every day, I would be 20 or 30 pounds heavier within 3 months, and it would not be muscle.
As well as whether or not there are some carnivore foods that certain people should avoid, and whether or not meat may be harmful for some individuals.
This is a very complicated answer. It's going to take me a while to say this, so everybody pay close attention.
But do you think there is a percentage of people who do need to eliminate? After watching this video, you'll know exactly what to do on the carnivore diet so you can achieve all of your goals. Awesome. So my first question to you, Mr. Berry, is conventional wisdom tells us, we hear it all the time, as long as we eat everything in moderation, things are going to be fine. But as we look across society, that is clearly not the case. What would you say to someone who advises to people to eat in moderation?
Well, this is ignorant advice. Where does this advice come from? Should we tell cows to eat all things in moderation, or should they just eat grass? Should we tell lions to eat all things in moderation, or should we tell them to just eat meat? Only when it comes to the nutrition of human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, do we say such ignorant things. This comes from the big food manufacturers, this kind of advice. They want you to eat the rainbow because then they make more money. Millions of people all around the world are discovering, gosh, when I eat some things exclusively and eat other things never, that's when I realize my best health. And I think such foolish advice is eat all things in moderation, eat the rainbow. These foolish nutrition advice tropes are quickly falling by the wayside.
So we have more and more doctors that are coming over to a regular keto style of diet, but obviously you're an advocate for carnivore diet. What would you say are the main advantages to getting rid of every plant, including the low carbohydrate vegetables?
Yeah, so for some people, that's absolutely where they will attain their best health. Now, I currently don't believe that everybody needs to eat a carnivore diet for the rest of their life, but I think there's a subset of people who absolutely do. I think there's a normal distribution curve when it comes to all things in biology and physiology. Some people can eat some low carb veggies, some berries, some nuts, and they seemingly do just fine. They realize and retain optimal health when they do that. Other people who are more inflamed by the lectins, the phytates, the saponifins, the phytoestrogens, the other things that occur in plants and in their seeds, they need to avoid this stuff altogether. And so I really advocate everybody do 90 days of a carnivore diet of beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. That way, because the carnivore diet is without question the most uninflammatory diet that a human being can eat. There's no doubt about that. And after you've done that 90-day purification of your personal physiology, then you can say, but I really love cashews, man, or I really love coffee, or I really love whatever plant food it happens to be. After you've purified your system with 90 days of carnivore, then you can add that plant food back in. And if there's immediate inflammation, if your body gives you immediate feedback, then you can mark that plant food or liquid off your diet. Like, no, obviously that causes inflammation. I should not be ingesting that. Many people do this and they find, oh, there's a list of 20 or 30 plant foods I can eat and it's just fine. Other people say, nope, every time I introduce a plant food, I have inflammation. So obviously, I am meant by my physiology to be a carnivore.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that many people may have inflammation that they don't even realize, even if they think they tolerate many of these plant foods? Because we see in the Mediterranean countries, they live long, healthy lives in theory, but in reality, they're all dying at 80, when in theory, humans could live to 120. And many of these people live lives with seemingly no effects from these plant foods.
Yeah, it's a principle of human nature that we get used to what we're used to. We have to do that or we go insane. There are so many things in our life every day. We have to ignore those things because they're so mundane and so commonplace that if you focused on every mundane thing in your life, you would go insane. And so many people around the world are living with chronic inappropriate inflammation. And they've been living with it for so many years, in some cases, many decades, that's just their normal. They have no idea. And that's why I'm a huge advocate for at least a 90-day trial of carnivore, because you don't know how inflamed you are. You don't know how fatigued you are. That's become your normal. And you're like, no, I feel fine. I feel normal. But you don't even realize how good you could feel after that 90 days of a carnivore purification process, 90 days of a trial of a carnivore diet.
You have made the beef, butter, bacon, eggs style of carnivore incredibly popular. So I'm curious, is that what you typically eat, or do you have, a lot of carnivores find the natural proclivity to become more and more towards the lion diet? What does a typical dad eating look like for you?
Yeah, for me currently, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs makes up 99.5% of my diet. I love dairy. So I would love to be able to include some yogurt or some sour cream or some Neufchâtel in every single meal because I freaking love it. But the inflammatory dairy proteins, they play their role in causing inflammation. Also, the hyperinsulinemic quality of many of the dairy proteins. I would start to gain weight and I would start to become pre-diabetic and I would start to be inflamed. So I have to stick to just animal flesh and eggs. I think for some people, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs is not tight enough. I think there is a subset of people that absolutely will have their best health on a lion diet. I'm a big proponent of the lion diet for the people who need that. I don't think all people do, but I think many people do.
Now, there are a small number of people who will go on the carnivore diet, say for 90 days, and they don't quite have the results that they see. Maybe the weight hasn't come down. They're not feeling quite as good as they hope they would. What do you think are some of the main mistakes that people make that results in them not achieving the results they'd like?
Yeah, every time I talk to somebody who claims to have done the 90-day carnivore challenge, and I kind of question them and dig down into what actually happened, I find that there's a lot of sauces, a lot of rubs, a lot of condiments, a lot of coffee, a lot of protein shakes. And they're like, well, it's protein. I thought that was carnivore. It's very easy for people to either genuinely misunderstand what we're doing here or blindly say they did that when they really didn't do that. And I don't think they're trying to trick anybody. I just think they're like, well, I had no idea. We have a lady in our private community who thought she was doing carnivore exactly right and just not getting the results she was looking for. When I questioned her at a deeper level, I found out she was eating a keto brick every day, which if people don't know, a keto brick it has some of the cleanest ingredients of any keto treat. But that's not carnivore. And so once she got that out of her diet, immediately she started to lose more visceral fat and started to notice reduced levels of inflammation. And so anytime somebody says, I did 90 days of carnivore, it didn't work for me, a few questions will often reveal maybe you ate a more meat heavy diet for those 90 days, but you didn't in fact really do carnivore for 90 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you think the biggest mistake people make with the carnivore diet is they're not on the carnivore diet?
And and I think it's because they don't understand the basic principles of what we're trying to accomplish here. There's nothing magic about meat or eggs. And a lot of carnivores go, wait, what? When I say that. But what the carnivore diet is the ultimate elimination diet. The benefits come from everything that you eliminate. Now, definitely, there are people out there with vitamin and mineral deficiencies, with fatty acid and amino acid deficiencies, that when they add more meat to their diet, they get healthier. They feel better. Their mental health is better. Absolutely true. But for the vast majority of people, especially people with diabetes, with metabolic syndrome, with hypertension, obesity, fatty liver, it's the elimination part of carnivore that works the magic. It's not magic, it's physiology. But it feels like magic because you can eat as much as you want. And all of these chronic medical conditions that you previously associated with, oh, I'm just eating too much food. Turns out, no, that's not the case at all. You were just eating too much of the wrong foods, or in many cases, you're eating too many food adjacent products that pretend to be food but aren't really human food at all.
Hmm. And another thing that a lot of people seem to struggle with is some people naturally have larger appetites. So there are a lot of people who can go on carnivore, they can eat all the meat, they can eat all the dairy they like, and achieve the body of their dreams, see tremendous results. But do you think there is a percentage of people who do need to eliminate dairy almost entirely to get to their goal weight?
100%. Yeah. And I'm one of those. If I continued carnivore, but I added in the amount of dairy that I would like to consume every day, I would be 20 or 30 pounds heavier within 3 months, and it would not be muscle. Uh, it's very, and this is one thing I agree with the vegans on. There is no place, if we're being ancestrally appropriate here, there is no place for dairy in the diet of an adult human. And I'm sorry, this will make some people mad, but this includes raw dairy. This includes raw milk, raw cheese, raw kefir. Though I think the more you ferment dairy, the less inflammatory it is. Absolutely, I agree with that. But that does not make it healthy. It just makes it less bad. And so I think it's a large subset of people that they can include some dairy as long as they moderate that and limit the volume. They can do just fine. But there's a significant subset of people that need to realize dairy is for babies. It's not for adults. And to the degree with which you overconsume dairy, you're going to have higher levels of inflammation, higher levels of visceral fat, higher levels of decreased mental health. You're just not going to do as well. And this hurts a lot of people's feelings. And I'm sorry for that. But dairy is for babies.
Um, Another thing with dairy that I see that is often not discussed very often is the hormones that dairy contains, things like estrogen, those sorts of things. Many people talk about the effects that the carbohydrates have in the dairy and the inflammatory properties that come as a result of the pasteurization. But do you think that some of these hormones that are in dairy are affecting human health?
Absolutely. Now, and also let's be very clear about this. When you say hormones in dairy, a lot of people think that you mean added hormones. And even the hormones that are added to the dairy cattle, the most common one is bovine growth hormone. It's a naturally occurring hormone. They just give the dairy cows higher doses of it, right? And so milk is full of hormones, even human milk. You hear there's a subset of people who are like, oh, colostrum is great. If you can find breast milk, that's great. No, that's also for babies. It is full of hormones that are in there for a specific reason, and the reason is to make you grow and gain weight. And so if somebody's an elite level bodybuilder, they might want to bulk up and then cut down. There might be a place for dairy in your diet because the hormones are definitely going to make you bulk up. That's what they're there for. But for people who are trying to get as lean as is healthy, and that's not too lean. There's a definition of what body fat percentage is in a healthy adult male and female. Dairy's not going to help you get that most of the time.
Another thing that really holds people back when they're starting the carnivore diet is they go 2, 3 days, maybe they're feeling good, but then the sugar cravings knock on the door. All they can think about is the Oreos or the Pop Tarts. What is your advice for someone who's on carnivore and these things occur?
Well, I love it when people go into their carnivore challenge with their eyes open. And I try to preemptively tell them, look, you're probably a sugar addict. And that's okay. But if you go into carnivore and you're not aware of that fact, about 3 to 7 days in, you're going to be jonesing, and you're not going to recognize it for what it actually is, which is carbohydrate withdrawals. Just like if you tell somebody quit smoking, you'll feel better the minute you do. You're setting that person up for failure, because when the nicotine withdrawals kick in, if you haven't warned them in advance, hey, it's going to suck. Okay, for 3 to 14 days, it's going to suck real damn bad. Then they think, well, gosh, I felt so much better when I was smoking. Maybe I should just go back to smoking. Maybe that's actually healthier because I feel better when I smoke. Same thing for sugar addiction. If you don't warn them in advance, hey, you're going to go through withdrawals, and it might suck a little bit or it might suck a lot of bit, depending on your physiology and how long you've been a sugar addict. I think you're setting people up for failure. They need to know that going in. They need to really know what it is and what to expect, so that when it does happen, they're like, oh, this is sugar withdrawal symptoms. This doesn't mean carnivore is bad for me. Here, I'm having some reaction to carnivore. I'm just withdrawing from the sugar, and that's going to take a few days for my body to adjust.
Mm-hmm. If you're enjoying this interview and you want to see more carnivore-related content like this, consider subscribing down below. The more subscribers we get, the more big interviews with special guests such as Ken Berry that we can do. I think another big problem people make when switching to a carnivore lifestyle from the standard American diet is they're not putting enough salt on their food. You know, salt's been villainized for a long time. We've got all these studies allegedly showing it's bad for us. Obviously, they have issues with healthy user bias, like we know about. But so they have all these ultra processed foods full of salt, and then they come on the carnivore diet and they put such a minuscule amount on. And then obviously, because you're in the low carbohydrate state, you're not retaining as much of these electrolytes. How much salt would you recommend someone put on their meat when they're starting carnivore?
Yeah, there's this new invention. It's a very technological thing. Okay, Elon Musk approves of it. He recommends that you use this new device. It's called your tongue. Okay, so we have this built-in salt receptor that tells us when we're getting enough salt. You should salt your food to taste. It's just that easy. If your food doesn't taste salty enough, add more salt. If it tastes too salty, you added too much salt. And your taste buds will actually adjust to your body's need for sodium. And so if people will just realize, I have been misled for salt. We all have. We've been misled for decades about salt. So much so that for many people, it's an unconscious belief. They don't even consciously know that they're limiting their salt. And so, yeah, you need to salt your meat to taste, salt your eggs to taste. Any food you eat, you need to salt it to taste. If I were able to have the magical powers of a televangelist and could reach through your screen right now and pull out every salt molecule out of your body, you would be dead within 3 minutes. People don't realize salt is vital. It is mandatory. It is good for you. It is not bad for you. Now, when you're eating a high carbohydrate, highly processed diet, eating too much salt might actually raise your blood pressure. But when you're eating a proper human diet, whether it's keto, ketovore, or carnivore, you need to salt your food to taste. You need that salt. It is good for you.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is, many people, they go on the carnivore diet, they see tremendous results. They've lost all the weight, they feel a lot better. And when people ask them, what are you doing? And they say, oh, I'm on this all meat diet. Even despite the fact that every tangible metric is improved with these people, they're under the impression that they're going to die. So is there any evidence at all that red meat is harmful for humans? Are there any compounds in there that maybe we want to avoid, or you think it's completely fine?
This is a very complicated answer. It's going to take me a while to say this, so everybody pay close attention. No.
Awesome. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Meat has been villainized for centuries by various religions, that it feels carnal, it feels sinful, it feels evil. And when you say, I'm eating nothing but meat, immediately anybody who doesn't understand the physiology thinks, oh, well, you're just a corrupt, evil sinner. You're just hedonic. You're just after the pleasure. That's not what this is about. You gotta lay aside all of the childish beliefs that you were taught. You have to remember what human beings are. You have to remember or learn anew where we came from. What have we eaten for the last 300,000 years? You got to put aside all the childish beliefs. You have to be blunt, you have to grow up. And for some people, that's very hard. I can remember when I first learned that Santa Claus wasn't real. It broke my heart. It fractured my worldview. And when you say to a colleague or a friend, they're like, man, you look amazing. I can tell you're so much happier. What are you doing? And you say, I eat nothing but meat. You have to realize in many cases, that is a hard blow for them. You are pushing back against training that they've been given their entire life. It's a pseudo religious belief that too much meat is definitely bad, and in some cases, any meat whatsoever is just a little bit sinful. You're being a little naughty if you eat meat. That's what we've all been trained to believe, and for many people, that belief is so closely held, is so near and dear to their heart. It brings up things that their grandmother told them when they were little, or things their mother told them when they were little. It's hard for people to get past that kind of training from that early age. Sometimes you'll repulse them initially when you say that, but you got to give them some grace, give them some time, realize that you've just told them Santa Claus is not real. It's going to take them a few days, a few weeks, a few months to process that, and then come back to you and say, are you kidding me? Is that really what you're doing here? That's when the conversation begins.
Now, for many people, the carnivore diet is sort of a last hope. They have all these health issues, and if they don't go on carnivore, chances are some very unpleasant things are going to happen to them. But there are a number of people, in particular my age, who are young, healthy. They don't have this immediate need to go on carnivore. What would your advice be to those people in terms of motivating them to start the proper human diet?
Yeah. If you look closely enough, anybody of any age who's looking at diet as a possible answer, they've got some pain points. It may be acne, it may be early male pattern baldness, it may be impotence, it may be inability to conceive, infertility, it may be their weight issues. They've got pain points, or they wouldn't even be thinking about diets. Think back to when you were in your early teenage years. If you were healthy, you're running around eating the Cheetos and Doritos, drinking the Pepsi. You're like, I don't even think about diet. Now, no, if somebody said you need to change your diet, you'd be like, why? I feel freaking amazing, right? But they usually have a pain point, and you've got to figure out what that pain point is. In many cases, they can't get rid of that 50 pounds. In many cases, their periods are mucked up. They can't understand why, even though they're on a birth control pill. They've seen the doctor, they've got the labs, they don't understand why this is happening to them. In many cases, it's mental health. I'm depressed all the time. I'm anxious all the time. I'm having panic attacks, or worse. You got to find that pain point and then point out an example. Hey, I know a guy or a girl who was just like you. They were having the same exact symptoms as you. And when they did this crazy all meat diet, those symptoms got significantly better. Then they're ready to listen.
So on the carnivore diet, we see, like you just mentioned, a number of people's mental health transform. I know young people, they're 20 years old, they've got everything in their life is going their way, yet they're chronically depressed. Why?
Yep.
What is the correlation, do you think, between diet and mental health, and why is it that eating these hyper processed foods tends to make people depressed for seemingly no reason?
Yeah, I think there's at least two things going on here. One is when you're eating an ultra processed diet, unless you're taking a handful of supplements every single day, you're going to have vitamin and mineral deficiencies. You're also going to have fatty acid deficiencies, amino acid deficiencies. So that's part of it. So when you add meat and eggs to your diet, all of a sudden you're getting all that nutrition. It's going to improve your mental health. People think that somehow the brain is disconnected from the body, that mental health, if you have a physical malady, then let's talk about diet and let's talk about, this, that, or the other. But if you've got a mental issue going on, oh, we need to talk about psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. We need to talk about these weird esoteric woo-woo things. Guess what? Your brain is made of meat. Your brain is meat. If a lion killed you, if they could get into your brain case, they would eat your brain too, because it's great nutrition. How come the brain is great nutrition? Because the body prioritizes putting these things into your brain, and therefore your mental health is literally built of what you've eaten over the last 3 months to 3 years. And people don't think that way about mental health. They think it's magical somehow. It's disconnected from the human body. And I think there's a lot of religious reasons that is. But when it comes right down to it, your brain is built of what you've eaten, just like your left bicep. is built of what you've eaten. If you're not happy with your left bicep, then you need to lift heavy weights and eat a proper human diet. If you're not happy with your mental health, then definitely see a mental health care provider. But also, you got to fix your diet, because that's what you're building your future neurons from.
Completely. Yeah, I think it's insane how they give people who are depressed, serotonin upregulated drugs when 90% of serotonin is made in the gut, and they're eating these ultra processed poisons with 27 different ingredients, emulsifier 2798 400,000. You know what I mean? All these
Yep.
ridiculous things when all they need to tell
Yep.
them to do is change your diet. But
Absolutely.
in terms of starting the carnivore diet, you see a lot of conflicting advice out there on there. Many people talk about how you should gradually tone back the amount of plants you're eating by half week by week to avoid things like oxalate dumping. But there are some other people that have more extreme personalities. They need to be all in on something. So what would your advice be to someone who's watching this and going, you know what, that Ken Berry guy, he makes a lot of sense. I want to start this thing. How should I
Yeah.
go about it?
Yeah, it depends on your personality, in my opinion. If you're a teetotaler, I think well, first of all, let's just say this and get this on the record. There is absolutely nothing dangerous or harmful or bad about a carnivore diet. Literally nothing. Okay. So, with that assumption, now we say, okay, let's look at your personality style. If you're an all in kind of guy, fine. Go through your pantry and your fridge and throw away all the plant food, fill them back up with animal foods, and start tomorrow morning. It's perfectly safe and fine. Some people are not teetotalers, they're moderators. They have to wean down slowly, or it's just not sustainable for them. And in that case, I think it's totally fine that each week you're ramping up the animal foods you eat, ramping down the plant foods that you eat. Literally, I don't care how long it takes somebody to adopt a proper human diet, which includes carnivore and the lion diet. What my goal is to get everybody on planet Earth on a proper human diet. I don't care if they do it overnight. I don't care if it takes 6 months for them to get there. The degree to which you improve your diet, that is the degree to which your health is going to improve. Okay. I think you're going to see noticeable benefits if you stop eating an ultra processed standard American diet and convert to a low carb diet that's full of real whole foods only. You're going to improve your health if you do that, right? That's why a lot of people, when they go from the standard American shit diet to a vegan diet, raw food, real whole food, plant-based, they feel better. Yes, because you're going to remove a ton of inflammation from all of the crap, the highly processed grains and legumes, but you're not going to sustain that health long term. You've got to keep eliminating, and you've got to keep adding the real human food in. So when you go from low carb to keto, that's going to, by definition, mean that you've increased your meat intake, right? And decreased your intake of other plant foods. You're going to feel better. When you go ketovore, once again, you've bumped up the meat and you've decreased the plants. You're going to feel better. And so if people need to go down that ladder, I'm perfectly happy with that. But there's nothing dangerous about switching to carnivore overnight. No physical danger, mental danger whatsoever, but you might have sugar withdrawals that are pretty rough.
There are many people under the disillusion that if they avoid certain foods, they have an eating disorder. I see dietitians online talking about this, that if you don't eat the ultra processed garbage, you have an eating disorder. Even I believe it's Dietitians AU has the definition of a fad diet on their website as a diet that people deliberately avoid certain foods. What are your thoughts when it comes to this? Is the carnivore diet a fad diet? Is my question.
The carnivore diet is actually the oldest diet known to humanity. There are multiple examples of societies successfully eating a carnivore diet their entire lives, multiple different societies all around the world. This is not just a geographical thing. This is not a religious thing. If you go back more than 12,000 years, you take all the religiosity out of the equation, because all the major religions were formed earlier, but after that, right? So if you take anybody of any religion, if you take anybody of any ethnicity, and you go back far enough in their family tree, their heritage is actually a carnivore diet. But they've forgotten that because we've been so confused by all the different inputs into our beliefs about what a diet should look like for a human being. the poor dietitians that say all things in moderation, eat the rainbow. If you exclude any food group, then you have an eating disorder. These poor people, I mean, they're obviously mentally pitiful on their face. I feel sorry for these people because they're singing a song that's never, ever going to be popular again. We're seeing this all around the world. Once people try a real whole food keto diet or a ketovore diet or a carnivore diet or a line diet, they're like, booyah. I did not know it was possible to feel this good and be this healthy. Now just imagine that person after they've had this epiphany. Have a dietitian tell them, well, if you exclude any food group, that's an eating disorder. They sound like a fool, and they are a fool. Not intentionally, they just don't know better. So quickly, that kind of foolishness with regards to dietary advice, that's going to fall by the wayside, because that's literally like taking mechanical advice on how to fix your car from a 3-year-old child. That's how ignorant that kind of advice is. And I predict you'll hear less and less of that as time goes on, unless they're paid by a big food manufacturer, which in many cases, that's actually what's going on in the background.
Indeed. What are your thoughts on organ meat? A lot of people are under the impression that to get every single nutrient, they need to be eating a certain amount of liver. And I think what a lot of people do is they end up over-consuming liver, and they get things like maybe even if it's just to a small degree, things like vitamin A toxicity, those sorts of things. So do you think that people should be consuming liver on a carnivore diet?
Yes, absolutely. Every single example that we have in biology, the animals are eating the internal organs. And if they can get to the brain, they're eating that. If they can get to the bone marrow, they're eating that. I think we should all eat nose to tail. I have zero fear of anybody developing vitamin A toxicity from eating a reasonable amount of the liver of a domesticated animal. Okay, now don't eat polar bear liver. There's documentation that it's too high in vitamin A. There's a couple of fish that the Japanese eat that their livers are far too high in vitamin A. I don't recommend eating those things, but the liver of a cow, sheep, goat, venison, pig, chicken, goose, duck, I have scoured the literature because I keep hearing this vitamin A toxicity scare story. And when I look at the literature, I can find multiple examples of people who develop vitamin A toxicity taking a vitamin A supplement. But I can't find a single case of somebody who didn't have a mental illness and they were eating, a pound of cow liver a day for months and months and months. I can't find a single example of somebody who ate liver once a week or twice a week or thrice a week. Oh my God, they developed vitamin A toxicity. That is just not in the case report literature. It would be there. There would be some doctor somewhere who had some lady she just loved liver and she was eating 8 ounces, 7 times a week and developed a vitamin A toxicity. I can't find that case report. If anybody can find it, please send it to me and I will adjust my belief and my recommendations. But I think everybody should eat 2 to 4 ounces of liver 2 or 3 times a week, whether it's cod liver, chicken liver, duck liver. You can eat it in any form. It can be pate. It can just be the raw liver. It can be a liver that's breaded with pork panko and fried in butter. I don't care, but I think liver is such a multivitamin, multi-mineral that many people could eliminate a lot of because what you see a lot of times is people on a carnivore diet taking 10 or 12 supplements a day. It's like, first of all, why are you doing that? You're wasting a ton of money. If you just eat 2 ounces of liver 3 times a week, you could throw 3/4 of those supplements in the garbage. You wouldn't even need them. So why not? A lot of people hate the taste of liver, and I totally get that. I don't love liver, but I like it well enough. If it's cooked properly, I can eat it 2 or 3 times a week, which is exactly what I do. But I hate it when people get too evangelical about the carnivore diet. And they're like, no, it should be muscle meat only, or it should be, a pound of organs a day. No, come on. Everybody calm down. Carnivore is not a religion. It is a movement, but it's not a religion. Okay. We don't have to be fanatical about any of this stuff. When in doubt, look to the nutrition literature. Much of the modern nutrition literature is complete and utter foolishness. The nutrition literature I find the most helpful is from a decade, 5 decades 10 decades in the past. That's very often the nutrition literature that you're like, okay, that makes perfect sense. And if you search that literature, you're not going to find anybody who ate a reasonable amount of domesticated animal liver. You're not going to find any cases of vitamin A toxicity or any other toxicity. I'm sorry, it's just not there.
Mhm. So would you say that it's a necessity to have liver then? Because obviously many people just eat muscle meat and they do fine. Do you think a liver is a necessity for the carnivore diet, or it's just a helpful addition?
No, I don't necessarily think it's a necessity. Because I know many carnivores who have not, they've eaten only muscle, meat, and fat from the periphery of the animal. They don't eat any organs and haven't done so for 10, 15, 20 years. And they're doing just fine. Now, I don't know if they're taking supplements or not. All I can go by is what they say. Often they don't mention that. So I don't know what's going on in the background. But yeah, I don't think it's a necessity, especially if you're including egg yolks from pastured chickens, because keep in mind, every egg yolk contains the liver and the brain and the spleen and every other internal organ of the chicken, the building blocks of that. So if you're eating egg yolks every day, you're effectively eating liver indirectly. But I don't think it's a necessity.
So when it comes to the main benefits of the carnivore diet, what are things you hear reported very often?
The list is too long. Let's just talk about the most common maladies that people are suffering from. Type 2 diabetes is going to reverse completely within 3 to 12 months on a carnivore diet. Fatty liver is going to reverse within 1 to 3 months on a carnivore diet. Metabolic syndrome is going to reverse in 3 to 9 months on a carnivore diet. PCOS is going to reverse in 3 to 15 months on a carnivore diet. Obesity is going to go, but you're going to approach your ideal body weight within 3 to 36 months on a carnivore diet, depending on multiple other factors. Your depression, your anxiety, your OCD. Even now, we're seeing that high-fat carnivore can be used with remarkable benefits in mental health issues like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. You could just go on and on and on and on. Now, the problem is that even though carnivore is the oldest diet human beings have ever eaten, it is a fad diet currently, in that we're rediscovering the power of it. And so there's not a lot of research in the recent nutrition literature about it. So therefore, for many people, it feels very faddish. It feels like some kind of new trend that's got no long-term studies to show benefit. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, what we're recommending here is just eat real human food. We're not recommending some new synthetic pharmaceutical that was made in a chemical factory in China. That's not what we're recommending here. We're just saying, hey, just eat meat and eggs for 90 days. And so that's not revolutionary. That's not, that's not some conspiracy theory. We're just saying eat meat and eggs for 90 days. If at the end of that 90 days you don't feel any better, you feel worse, then stop it and go back to your old diet. Mm-hmm. Either whatever you eat, I'm going to love you. I don't care. But I know if you're suffering and you're sick, you need to try 90 days of carnivore.
Now, we see in the wild with every animal, I should say, that they all eat the exact same thing. Every single species, they all eat the same foods. It's not, hey, you're growing, you eat this type of plant, we'll eat this meat over here. But when it comes to humans, a lot of people say, no, the proper human diet is not for me. Do you think that everyone, including younger children, can do the carnivore diet?
Every human of every age and with any known medical condition is going to benefit from eating a proper human diet. For many people, their place on the spectrum of a proper human diet is carnivore or lion diet. Maybe for just a while, maybe 3 months, maybe for the rest of their life. The only way to know is to try it. There is no human being on planet Earth who should not eat a proper human diet, regardless of what medical condition you have, regardless of what your doctor told you, regardless of what your dietitian or your psychiatrist told you. Your health will improve if you eat a proper human diet consistently enough for long enough.
So many people, including myself, we go on the carnivore diet, everything's looking good, and we go and see our doctor and we tell him that we're on this all meat thing. In fact, my doctor recently sent out an email from that vegan doctor, what's his name, Mr. Greger or something like that, talking about his book in his recent email. So many people go on carnivore, everything's going good, and then their doctors, who they believe are highly educated on nutrition, like almost scare them out of it. What would you say to
Sure.
people who are deterred by their doctor's opinion?
Well, the first thing people need to realize, and keep in mind, this is coming from a doctor who's been licensed and practicing for over 22 years. Doctors are just dudes and chicks. They are susceptible to every logical fallacy. They're susceptible to big food and big pharma advertising. They are just as capable of making mistakes as any other human. You have to understand that. Then that helps you look at your doctor with fresh eyes. And so when your doctor says something like that, you're not going to, the spell is basically broken, because we've all heard stories of the witch doctor in the tribe. Everybody's afraid of them. They look up to them. Anything they say is like the new gospel. A lot of people look at their doctor like that. And we've actually been trained by society to look at our doctor like that, like whatever they say is gospel. That's not true. Doctors are just as susceptible to making mistakes and giving ignorant nutrition advice as your hairdresser or your mechanic or your mama or your next door neighbor. Most doctors receive very little training in nutrition, and most doctors, to be honest, don't think about nutrition very much. They're trying to keep up with all the latest and greatest pharmaceuticals. What's the newest drug? Oh, I've got to figure out how to get into the habit of prescribing that new drug. They're not thinking about what does anthropology say about the human diet? What does archaeology say? What does paleoanthropology say about a proper human diet? They don't think like that. And so what I recommend people remember is two things. You don't need your doctor's permission to eat a proper human diet, okay? When your doctor says, what's your diet look like? You can say, I'm eating a unprocessed, whole, real food, sugar-free diet. Did I just describe a carnivore diet?
I guess so.
Sure. Now, but what doctor is going to say, oh, you shouldn't do that? No, they'll be like, oh, that sounds great. Keep doing that, right? The second thing you've got to understand is you don't need a carnivore doctor or a keto doctor. You don't need that. You don't need your doctor's permission. And in many cases, people who have been eating keto or carnivore for a few years, they've read so many nutrition articles and so much nutrition research, they know more about nutrition than their doctor. All you need your doctor for is to order lab work, to order tests. They're the gatekeeper, basically. And then in very few instances, but sometimes you need them to prescribe a medication. That's literally their only job that you need them for. You don't need their permission to eat a proper human diet, and you don't need to take their guidance on what is a proper human diet, because in many cases, they have no idea.
Okay, I've got one final question. So for a lot of people, they can see the logic in not eating vegetables. You know, when you explain to them how essentially plants, at least to some degree, are trying to kill them, and you kind of talk them through it in a more logical way. You say, you know, what difference is spinach to a random plant in your garden? You know, why would humans over time have eaten this one plant that doesn't taste very good, doesn't contain any energy, and we only started agriculture 12,000 years ago. There was no vegetables in the human diet. Most people can logically see that, but they're under the impression that we were eating lots of fruit. So what's your argument against fruit?
Fruit is very high in sugar content, and I think fruit did serve a useful purpose thousands of years ago. Human beings, life was hard then, okay? Let's just say 50,000 years ago. No one had a refrigerator. No one had a deep freezer. No one had a pantry. You either killed it, brought it home and ate it, or you starved to death. And so, especially during the winter in temperate climates, the winter, you had a high risk of just starving to death or becoming so malnourished that you develop some disease, which would then kill you. And so during the late summer and the fall, it actually was advantageous to cram all the fruit in your mouth, because that fructose was going to cause you to store fat in your liver and store subcutaneous fat and even store visceral fat, because back then those things were actually protective. So then if there was a very harsh winter, you had reserves. You had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calories of stored energy that you could limp by and make it until spring. A lot of people who don't live close to nature, They don't understand. They think as soon as spring gets here, oh man, there's fruit and vegetables and everything everywhere. No, that's not how it is. If anybody has tried to grow their own food, it's late summer before any food is that's edible to humans is ready. So the spring, early spring is just as dangerous as the dead of winter. You may not freeze to death, but there's also still nothing for a human being to eat. That's why we cram the fruit and the berries and the nuts in our mouth, because we were trying to put on 10 or 20 pounds of fat. That was insurance to get you through the winter. But now that we have refrigerators and deep freezers, you don't need that. You don't need that insurance, because you're going to have just as much food to eat in the dead of winter as you have during the harvest time. Uh, this is hard for some people to understand, but and a lot of people try to mimic the seasonality of eating. They're like, well, I'm going to eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, a lot of fruit and berries during the harvest season, because that's what our ancestors did, not realizing what was the strategy. Why were they doing that? They taste great, sure, but they were trying to gain fat. That's literally what they were trying to do, is put as much fat on as possible. We see this behavior echoed in bears. When the berries are ripe, they'll eat pounds of berries and they'll gain 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds for the winter. They're not eating those berries because they contain some magical phytonutrient. They're not eating all the melons and the fruits because they contain some magical nutrition that's going to improve their health. They're trying to get fat so they don't starve to death over the winter. And I would opine that humans mimic that behavior, and that's what got them through many of a hard winter. But there's no benefit to eating lots of fruits and berries in your diet. There's no long-term benefit of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Berry. Your insight is appreciated as always. Where can people check you out if they wanna hear more from you?
So we've got our website up and running now, drberry.com, drberry.com. We've got links from there to everything, to my YouTube channel, to the books that I've written, to all the different things we do. And then also for many people who have no family or friends who are trying to eat a proper human diet, who are actually actively trying to discourage that, we started a community. We've got thousands of people in there now who you can find someone to go on your journey of rediscovering a proper human diet with, so you don't have to do it alone. A lot of people find that very useful, and that community is there as an option if you need that as well on my website, drberry.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.